Welcome into the Jazz Notes podcast. I'm your host, Ben Anderson, rolling solo today. We are recording this on January 5th, so Happy New Year to everybody out there. Appreciate everybody sticking with us. Again, entering 2026. Hope everybody had a safe holiday and a good new year. But interesting time to be a Jazz fan right now. If you're out there listening, appreciate everybody finding us wherever you find your podcast, reading us at kslsports.com. And, of course, finding me on social media at Ben's Hoops. Going to be solo again next Monday. I believe David James and I are planning on recording a second episode this week on Thursday. And then Chandler will be back 2 weeks from now. But let's go where we always go. Start with the last week that was. We'll look at what's coming up for the Jazz before we record again. And then we'll get into your mailbag questions. The Jazz are 0-2 this week, and really 0-3 since we didn't record last Thursday because it was New Year's Day. Since we last spoke, the Jazz, after winning back-to-back games just after Christmas against Detroit and on the road at San Antonio, which certainly seemed to throw a wrinkle into the direction of the season, have gone back to their losing ways. The Jazz lose at home to the Celtics, kind of get not blown out in the second half, but the Jazz felt like they were certainly in a spot to win that game, and then it wasn't all that threatening down the stretch. They lose to the Clippers as well. Basically, everybody sits. Ace Bailey's been hurt. Nurkic, I believe, sits in that game. Keontae George doesn't play in that game. Larry Markkinen doesn't play in that game. And then against Golden State, some of those guys come back. Nurk doesn't play. Ace Bailey still doesn't play. But Lowry and Key are back. And the Jazz still lose on the road at Golden State. And I do think one of the trends you're starting to see is that, and it was common in all three of these losses, was that the fourth quarter of the Jazz have not been very good. They get outscored big by the Celtics. They get outscored by the Clippers. Eventually things were just going to fall apart there. Jazz started slow against LA and then came back, and then it trickled off late. And then same with Golden State. Jazz were the better team than Golden State in the first half. And then second half of the game, still maybe just don't have the experience to close out some of these games or aren't all that interested in closing out these games with wins. So I think that's something to keep an eye on there for the Jazz. In fact, let's look at these last three games and where they've been in the fourth quarter, because I do think that could tell us a little bit about how the Jazz can lose games if that's the plan going forward, where they can try and stay competitive somewhat and maybe cause some Jazz fans to lose some hair during the first 36 minutes of the game, only to blow it in the fourth. Jazz, going in the fourth quarter over their last three games, have the fourth worst offense in the NBA, or I should say fifth worst offensive rating in the NBA at just 92.4 points per 100 possessions. And then defensively, they own the second worst defense at 134.8 points per 100 possessions, to give the Jazz a fourth quarter net rating that is the worst in the NBA over their last three, minus 42.4, which is shocking. Again, you've gotten blown out in a couple of those, and they've given up some leads and allowed the Clippers to kind of run roughshod over them in the fourth there. So not surprising, extraordinarily small sample size, truly just 36 minutes total, but a sense that the Jazz aren't closing particularly well. So maybe if you're a Jazz fan and your team's close in games and you don't want to see them winning because you want to see them convey that or hold on to their draft pick and not give it to the Oklahoma City Thunder, maybe don't stress until you get to the fourth quarter or 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter, because the Jazz are generally seemingly playing relatively well for the first halves of games. They're in a lot of these games, and then things are falling apart late, which maybe by design, may just be a lack of experience. As good as Keontae George has been, and he's continued his terrific run, he's just not quite a guy who's been in a lot of close situations in fourth quarters, knowing what he has to do to win games. And that's part of this developmental process and still valuable for him and something that can still be useful going forward. But we also know that if the Jazz are up in the, after three, they're going to have a chance to win games just because they have a very good offense. So maybe they are purposely not playing particularly well in the fourth quarter here. Something to track. I'm not ready necessarily to stake my claim there and say that's absolutely going to be the case going forward. So worth keeping an eye on if you're a Jazz fan, and maybe the theme of these last three games. Good starts, or at least competitive starts, sans the Clippers, and then falling apart a little bit late. Here's what's coming up this week before we record next on Thursday. Tonight, Monday, the Jazz are going to take on the Portland Trail Blazers on the road at OKC on Wednesday. Probably not a lot of concern that the Jazz would beat the Thunder in Oklahoma City. So if you're a Jazz fan, you were concerned about that. Probably nothing to worry about there. Portland's certainly a little dicier. The Jazz are not that far back from the Trailblazers in the standings. It has grown since we last talked. It was 1.5 games the last time we spoke. It is down. It's up to 3 games now. The Portland Trail Blazers have won 2 in a row, and the Jazz have lost 3 straight. So you've seen some more space grown there. As far as the overall standings go, let's look at the conference first and where the Jazz sit and how close they are now to that final play-in spot. Not too long ago, just a few days ago, the Jazz were the top team or the 11th team in the West, the 1.5 games back of the Trail Blazers for that final play-in spot. Portland's actually moved up to the 9th seed in the play-in tournament spot. The Grizzlies have fallen now to the 10th and final spot in the play-in. Grizzlies 15-20. What a disaster season they are having. Not good enough to be in the playoffs and not bad enough to be getting a good lottery pick. So not a great spot for the Jazz or for the Grizzlies there. But the Jazz have gone from the 11th seed in the West to the 13th. Dallas has jumped them. Now, technically, all these teams are tied. The Clippers, the Jazz, and the Mavericks are all tied 17 games back of the number 1 overall seed in the West. But the Jazz are at 12-22. Clippers are at 12-22. And the Mavericks are at 13-23. So the Jazz are now own the 3rd West record in the NBA, or in the West, I should say, but are tied with the 2 teams in front of them. The good news is, barring, and we'll see what happens with the Mavericks. It's only 3-7 over their last 10, but they have Anthony Davis back, and he's playing well when he's on the floor, and Cooper Flag continues to get better. I would imagine Dallas keeps playing better than the Jazz. Now, they've been pretty shameless in their tanking when they've needed to be as well, so I wouldn't put anything past them. They could still absolutely pull the plug on the season and probably should. The Clippers I was not impressed with against the Jazz, though obviously when they were playing in between Christmas and New Year's or right after New Year's is always just a bit of a dicey game. That was on New Year's Day, so you just kind of never know in those holiday games. They can always be a little bit weird, especially playing at home, especially playing against a Jazz team that was missing basically everybody off the roster. They probably took the Jazz very lightly, especially after jumping out to a 16-0 start, and then when they wanted to put the pedal down and push the Jazz away in the 4th, they were able to do that. So maybe not a ton to read into about the Clippers not being particularly good. They don't need to be good. They just need to be better than the Jazz, and that shouldn't be all that difficult the rest of the way. And again, that's your pathway to the Jazz, very clearly missing the play-in tournament in the West, and then setting themselves up to hold on to their draft pick. And if you are a Jazz fan who is starting to track that, and it is the new year, so unfortunately that probably does shift the narrative of what should be a priority for the Jazz this season. The worst team in the NBA is the Indiana Pacers. They would have the top pick right now if before the lottery. Kings are the 2nd worst record. Pelicans the 3rd worst record. Wizards 4th worst record. Nets 5th worst record. A half game behind the Jazz, and the Nets are 5-5 in their last 10, including just beating Denver yesterday. And then the Jazz are right there again, tied with some other teams, but with the 6th worst record in the NBA. And I've said kind of consistently, if the Jazz finish with the 6th worst record in the NBA, I think you're very safe to hold on to the pick. It could still happen. I think you're in the 90s, but it could potentially still get conveyed if you get left by 2 teams. And technically, you'd need to be left by 3, right? Because you'd have to fall to 7, to 8, and then to 9. If you end up with the 5th worst record, which the Jazz are a half game back ahead of the 5th worst record in the NBA right now, you're basically guaranteed. It's well over a 99% chance of holding onto the pick. So the Jazz are positioning themselves the way they've needed to. I know, again, there's been some consternation from Jazz fans about, are they going to be able to hold on to this pick or not? Look, it's so early in the season. You're still only 3 wins ahead of the Washington Wizards. At this point last year, where were the Jazz in the standings? Like, teams could easily make up 3 wins before the end of the year. That could certainly happen. So we will see where the Jazz finish, but it does look like they are lined up to control whatever outcome they want to have for the rest of the season. If they want to hold on to their pick and feel relatively safe doing it, they can. It will probably take a commitment to resting some players, sitting some players, having players, take extra long to get back from their injuries. But if they want to do that, they certainly seem like that's going to be in their wheelhouse. A little bit of news quickly tonight against the Portland Trail Blazers. The Jazz will have Lauri Markkanen and Keontae George. It looks like they will also have Yusuf Nurkic. He is back, and he's kind of been a bellwether. When he's been on the floor, I think the Jazz have been much better. When he's been off the floor, the Jazz aren't winning a lot of games. Ace Bailey remains questionable with his hip flexor. One of the things we talked about is these are the types of games where I think you would have liked to have seen Ace playing. When you're, against the Clippers and a lot of the roster's out, you would like to see him getting out there and getting 15 to 20 shots. What does he look like as a true number 1 option? We haven't really seen that at any point this season. He could have had that opportunity. We will see if he gets more of those throughout the second half of the season. All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we will get to your mailbag questions. Stick around. More Jazz Notes coming up next. Welcome back to the Jazz Notes podcast. Ben Anderson. All right, it's time for the mailbag segment of the show. As always on Monday, I like to put out a prompt fielding your Utah Jazz or NBA questions. You can respond there. I will answer them on the show, but you can also follow me on Blue Sky. I put the prompt there. Or you can DM me throughout the week, and I will try to make sure I didn't miss any DMs here. There's a chance that I did, but I think I got them, including one on my Instagram, which you can reach out to me there, too. My DMs are open on IG as well. So don't be afraid to send them there. But yes, we got a lot of questions coming in this week, nearly 20 again. So Jazz fans, you're sickos, and it makes my job a lot easier. So I appreciate it. We will start with Todd Crow, who reached out through Instagram. Said, can you name 3 bigger black holes than Lowry? How do the rest of the guys feel about his passing? Lowry is certainly not a terrific passer. He's not an A-plus passer. He is having, I think, the best passing season of his career right now, and certainly seems more willing to move the ball. I do think the entire system is, the Jazz system is set up to get him the ball in spots where he can shoot. He makes 13 shots inside the paint against the Golden State Warriors. They are trying to get him in advantageous situations where he's going to play better. And when they, have tried to put him at the elbow and, put him in the middle of the offense and allow him to see where the help is coming defensively and make a pass there, he just really wasn't that good at that. So I don't think that's going to be his strength. But yeah, he's at 2.1 assists this year. It's not great. It's why Lowry has a little bit of a ceiling as like a legit number one player. He's just not a playmaker. He has great gravity, and that certainly helps. And he's certainly made some better passes this year than I think he has in years past. But he's always been a complimentary player who doesn't pass particularly well. And he's stellar. I mean, he's a very, very good player. And yeah, he's averaging a career high right now at 2.1 assists per game. But that's just a pretty low number overall. That's just not good enough to be, the number one, give you the ball late, and you're either going to score or you're going to abuse the team by finding the open player. It's just not his game. So that's why I think generally when you're talking about Lowry and his ideal role, it is as his number 2 guy, or maybe even a number 3 guy. But he is exceptional at that if you allow him to play in that role. So black hole, he's just not a great passer. I'm not sure he's necessarily selfish so much that the Jazz are just optimizing what he does at his best. Todd also asks, if Clayton and Collier progress, how do you feel about Keontae permanently more or less at the 2? In conjunction, if we keep our pick this year and we get a wing, who's left out next year? To answer the second part of the question first, I just think the jury's out on Cody and Bryce. Certainly still at this point, either one of those guys could probably be replaced by an incoming player if the Jazz were to draft a wing. Taylor Hendricks could certainly be in that conversation as well, depending, does Caleb Wilson come in? Does he play the 4? He's not really a shooter, so I'm not sure where he plays on the perimeter in today's NBA, or at least as like a true perimeter player. If he can't shoot particularly well, that could put Taylor's job, in some jeopardy, though Taylor shot the ball relatively well this year, so that's a good sign for his future. I don't think anything's fully established on the wing, and that includes, other than Lowry Markkanen, I think that includes Ace Bailey. The right guy comes in and is an all-star and, looks like a guy who's going to be a true number 1 or number 2 going forward. And Ace could still get there. I'm not counting Ace out. I'm not a crazy person, but, I don't think anyone's job is necessarily locked in and safe. To go back to the first part of your question, I really like Keontae on the ball. I would keep Keontae on the ball basically as much as possible, minus the 10 to 15 minutes a night where, yes, you are trying to keep him on the floor, but also get Collier minutes or get Walt Clayton minutes. Walt can play a little bit more of the 2, so that's fine. He and Key can kind of switch off. Isaiah's purely a 1 right now at this point in his career, and probably will be going forward. So if that's going to be the case, I would just let him be a backup or try and move him to get more value. But you don't need to worry about that right now. I mean, Keontae's very good. He's not quite gotten to that point where I'm making trades to clear room for him, minus, the veterans in front of him like Colin Sexton in the offseason. So no rush there. I don't think there's any urgency. But I wouldn't move Keontae off the ball. Keontae's really dangerous. He's a great shooter suddenly with the ball in his hands, dribbling into his threes. That's the best shot in basketball. I think it's the most dangerous. I should say it's not the best. But if you have a guy who's dangerous shooting off the dribble on the perimeter, your offense tends to go. Your offense really tends to move well. So I would keep Keontae there and not try and take the ball out of his hands too much. He's also become just a much better passer and playmaker. He's a good playmaker. We're talking about Lowry not being able to pass particularly well. Keontae has gotten very good about making plays for his teammates, making life easier for his teammates. And Nurk's a great screen setter. I'm not sure he's a great roller. conceivably, Keontae could get even better once he has more of a pick and roll player he can throw some lobs to. If that makes him better, I guess there's a chance it could also make life a little trickier. You never know on that. It can make life a little bit trickier if it feels like he has a little bit less space. But Todd, good questions. Couple on Blue Sky. Sammy Paradise says, could you talk a little bit about Cody Williams' mild improvement? Seems more like an NBA player to me. I don't think Cody legitimately knew where he could operate. And if you went back to Colorado and something I guess I thought was a strength, and maybe it wasn't, or maybe it just needed a while to develop and get to the NBA, was he was so slithery, which means he would kind of like worm his way or snake his way in between the defense and get to these like crazy hook shots and weird runners and finishes. And they went in at a really high rate. That's why he had insane shooting percentages in college that haven't followed him at all to the NBA. But like this ability to get downhill and get into the paint that we are seeing lately with these couple of posters that he's thrown down and attacking the rim off the dribble, that was there. But guys were smaller than he was, and the strength discrepancy wasn't so much so. I mean, they were still stronger than he was in college, but the strength discrepancy wasn't so big that he was just getting bumped off his spot and then couldn't finish. He's getting stronger, and that's allowing him to get back to kind of that slithery game that allows him to get to the paint. Now he's drawing a couple of fouls, which has really helped. But he's also just not afraid to finish over guys, and I think has some more strength to be able to do it. So he's had a couple of nice dunks in the last 3 weeks, and I think that's certainly a positive for him. Confidence is really good. Like I really enjoy Cody Williams, the person, talking to him. Again, I don't pretend to really know these guys outside of when I get to talk to them in the locker room. But I have enjoyed that, those interactions I've had with him. He's just a very kind person. He seems like a very polite, and I don't want to say gentle, but like just like a young person. He's 20 years old, 21 years old. He's a young man. And I do think he kind of needs to grow out of the young man aspect of his life. He probably needs to grow into the I'm an adult. I'm kind of my own entity. And I don't want to say that's a reflection of always being the younger brother his whole life, but I'm sure there is a part of that. He's kind of been the younger brother, and maybe he just needs to be the independent Cody Williams and not Cody Williams, the brother of J-Dub. So I think maybe we're seeing a little bit more of that, a little bit more understanding of the individual. And I think that has helped him. He's always been a good defensive player. He's not that strong, so I think guys score over him because they can get to their spots somewhat, but I like the way he moves. His instincts are right. He's always in the right spot, it feels like. He's not blowing his assignment very often. So I think there's tools there. I think there's a lot there. One of the things I mentioned on Twitter that I really stand by, and I think you see it when you see him play, is that when he just grabs and goes, when he gets the ball and reacts immediately, he's good. When he stops and surveys or thinks about shooting, he's not very good then. That's when he's really struggled, because I think then opposing defenses close out on him, and what advantages he has right now are negated. And his advantages are he's really long. He's relatively athletic. He's not like a huge high flyer. Like even his dunk over Quentin Post, it's not Derek Williams jumping off the floor, to get these huge dunks like we've seen some of these, bouncy wings historically. He's a little more ground bound, but certainly not stuck on the ground. So he's just executing quickly, which allows his physical tools to shine a little bit more. And he has good physical tools, minus he's just underweight. He's just not super strong yet. And again, man, he was so young when the Jazz drafted him. He was so inexperienced. He didn't play that many games in college. It's just important to remember, and front offices are bad at this. This isn't a fan problem. This is a league problem. This is a human problem. You just want instant results. Like, drafted a 20-year-old. Maybe he's even 19 when the Jazz drafted him. He turned 20 right after he got drafted. I can't remember exactly what his birthday is, but he was always going to take 2 or 3 years. And so you can't then start judging him a year and a half in and being like, well, why aren't you great yet? It's like, well, if it was going to take 2 or 3 years, he might be halfway to where the Jazz wanted to see him before they were going to really start judging him. So they need to be careful with that. I wouldn't give up on Cody. Again, I know he makes a little bit more because he was a lottery pick than some first-round draft picks, and that makes those guys easier to keep around. I thought it was smart to sign him to a rookie extension, or at least to pick up his third-year option. So you've got him through next year. And maybe he doesn't develop into a whole lot, but maybe he has a lot more in the tank, and I think you're starting to see some flashes of that. So good for Cody. That's kind of what I think I've seen there. Joe Green on Blue Sky says, I love Keontae, but we're in dangerous territory with the 2 big wins he's talking about last weekend. And he says this still kind of holds for this week. He says, if you're the Jazz, would you rather have, say, the 7th pick in 2026, that's this season now, this summer, Tari Eason, and a bad first, or lose the pick and pay Keontae a big contract? So I think what you're assuming, Joe Green, is that the Jazz could get Tari Eason, a bad first-round pick this year from Houston, for Keontae, and then still hold on to this year's 2026 pick, maybe the 7th pick, or lose the pick and have Keontae George. I still think the answer is lose the pick and have Keontae. I'm like a really big believer in what Keontae's doing right now. I think this is the start of something really, really good, and the type of player that's really hard to replace. Like, I made a joke on Twitter, like, Keontae continues to average 30 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds. Is he the 4th best player in the NBA? Like, he's not the 4th best player in the NBA. I'm not silly, but like, what's stopping him from averaging 30 2 years from now? I don't really know what it is. If he's shooting this well, again, his shooting percentages match Lauri Markkanen right now, and he gets to the rim at will, and he's getting fouled a whole bunch. Like, he's not a great defensive player yet. Nobody on the Jazz is, and I think it's hard to expect a guard to have good defensive metrics when nobody around them is a good defender. And with all due respect, Kevin Love and Yusuf Nurkic aren't exactly, the great rim protectors in the NBA. If the Jazz start to focus on that more this offseason, building a defense from the rim out, will Keontae look better? Maybe. Donovan Mitchell's not a good defensive player. His metrics weren't worst in the NBA, but he also had Rudy Gobert behind him. So if the Jazz start to focus on getting more of those types of players to defend the rim, make Keontae's life a little bit easier, do those numbers suddenly start to look a lot better? So I would tell you right now, I would not trade Keontae George. I wouldn't think about it. I wouldn't do it at the deadline unless you're getting one of the, impossible to get guys back for him. And I guess that's possible. The Jazz have a bunch of draft picks, and, Keontae's a good young player. And if the Jazz wanted to sell while his stock was at its highest, you would have to get a lot back, like really a lot back. But I just wouldn't move him. There's no reason to move him. He's cheap. He's fully bought in. Like the change as a person overall has been enormous. He seems to like Utah. He seems to like his teammates here. He seems to like Will Hardy and vice versa. So I wouldn't move that. Brandon Stone, kind of going back to the Cody Williams story, says, are there specific milestones that Cody needs to achieve in order for the Jazz to pick up his 4th-year option? I bet he needs to shoot better. He's just not shooting well right now, and he was a better shooter in college than he is, so I wouldn't say it's impossible that he's going to shoot the three-point ball at all. Some guys really don't ever become shooters. I did think it was fascinating. Cody said, I think it was after that Clippers game, that he'd been watching Corey Brewer highlights. That was a really interesting comp. It's why coaches are really creative. You look at guys whose bodies never really quote unquote developed strength wise. Corey was really wiry and strong, but not ever like heavy. Some of the skinniest legs I've ever seen in my life, and couldn't shoot at all, but was a good defensive player and got out in transition and was a good cutter off the ball. Those are all things that conceivably Cody could do. But I'm not selling Cody short as a shooter. Like, I think that has a chance to come around. Again, he's at 15% this year. He's just been so out of the lineup. I don't believe that 15% number. I think that number will come up with more reps and more opportunity. So that should improve. 15% is just like absurdly low. If that doesn't get better, he's not an NBA player. Flat out. There's not wings that shoot 15% from the floor unless you're, Jonathan Isaac and just an absolute insane defensive player. And even I bet Jonathan Isaac's a much better 3-point shooter than that. So that number will have to come up, and he's going to have to continue to get stronger. And as he does that, I think some of the other things will come around, the rebounding, some ability to get some assists because he can get the ball in his hands and penetrate and then kick the ball out. So those are the types of things I would keep an eye on. All right, let's switch over to Twitter. Look at my DMs. I know we got a couple in here, so let me see if I can go back and find them from the last week. From Braden. This is thoughts on potential free agent trade targets of Derek White or Nickeil Alexander-Walker coming back. I feel like the wing defense and offensive game would be great. Derek White, yes. The Celtics are legitimately threatening to be the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and they might get Jason Tatum back this year. I don't think Derek White's going anywhere. If they wanted to move off, and they could have. I wonder if you could. What did Drew Holiday's contract ended up being in Portland? I know he's been out of the lineup, so he hasn't been playing that much. How much more time does he have? There's a past Jazz target that is certainly older now. What is he, 34, 35 in that range? I'm trying to figure out what his contract was that he just signed. Maybe his contract is so big that it makes it silly, and I kind of remember that being the case. I wonder if that's a guy you could now buy on his final stop or late in his career. Just be like, hey, Portland, that was a terrible decision by you to give him they gave him $32 million this year, $34 million next year. Holy cow. And then he's got a player option for $37. So no, he's probably off the board. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the Jazz. I'd throw him out. Certainly Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been really good and continues to play well, even in Atlanta, who has been one of the more disappointing teams in the season, in the NBA this season. Maybe a little bit under the radar how disappointing they've been just because nobody pays attention to them. But there was some real hype around that team. And now they're going to move off of Trae Young. And if they do that, they're probably wanting to hold on to Nickeil. And they acquired him in the offseason because they saw the same things that I think, Braden, you're asking about with him. Yeah, I like the idea, and those are the types of players the Jazz need. I mean, the Jazz need a big kind of 1-2 guy who can play both backcourt positions to play next to Keontae. I think that's the ideal role. Derek White does that, Nickeil does that, and now you got to go out and find somebody else who can fit into that spot. So if you can, absolutely terrific. Maybe you could draft him if you win the lottery and go get Darren Peterson. But those are the types of names I would certainly be keeping an eye on. I don't know if either of those is necessarily available. Maybe Atlanta wins the lottery because they own the Pelicans pick and they don't need Nickeil anymore, and they kind of retool around their new player and Jalen Johnson. I could see them doing that. Maybe Nickeil becomes available and you send something back their way. Certainly, I guess, an option there. But yeah, the right type of player, I would think that's who I would be keeping an eye on for the Jazz to pair next to Keontae George. All right, let's go to our traditional Twitter responses. 19 of them. Holy cow, we're going to be here for a while. Appreciate everyone, as always, following up with these questions. Jake the Lynx. How do the players handle the obvious tanking and injury lineup manipulation to lose games? I mean, they are smart. They can obviously see what's going on, right? Are they cool with it? Do they want to be? Do they also want a top pick on their team, or do they get frustrated by it? I think some guys get frustrated by it. I think winning games is more fun than losing games. And again, one thing I've said before is all these guys are independent contractors. You'd like to think it's all team first, yada, yada. And there's certainly part of that. There is some of that. It's not like they hate each other. They like each other and they like to win together. But everyone's worried about their next stop, their next contract, et cetera, et cetera. You just kind of live vine to vine there. So I don't think it's necessarily fun, but also I think a lot of guys recognize, man, I can't control what anything else happens. I just got to go out there and play my game when I have the opportunity to play. And if I do that, things will take care of themselves. So I'm sure some older guys, may wish they were doing some things differently, though I've not seen that at all. I do think for guys like, Colin Sexton last year or John Collins last year, maybe that's a little more difficult. Lowry certainly, but Lowry's also making $40 million a season. Like, what does Lowry have to complain about? So I haven't really seen a lot of discontent about it so far this season. Kayla Manser, do you feel like the Jazz are on the fast track to mediocrity if they convey their pick this year? I feel their ceiling would be similar to the recent Bulls and Kings playoff teams. I don't really see a reason to convey the pick. I guess how I would answer that. The way to not be mediocre like the Bulls or the Kings is that Keontae continues to turn to a star, Lowry plays at this level, and Ace Bailey takes that next step. Now, the Bulls have been betting on those types of things. Kobe White and, whoever they think their front court star is going to be, Vucevic, or for a minute they thought it was going to be Patrick Williams or whoever. And then this third guy, Modest Buzelis, or whoever is going to step up and become a star. Or they had Zach LaVine, and that was their Keontae George, and then DeMar DeRozan, and they thought they were going to break out. It's a dangerous trap to fall into, and you can look at it with the Kings and say De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, and then maybe that third guy breaks out and it's Keegan Murray or whoever, and they take the step forward, and it just never happens. You're right. It's a dangerous pit to fall into. It's why they shouldn't convey the pick, I don't think. The difference is the Kings have terrible ownership. The Bulls have terrible ownership. I don't think the Jazz have terrible ownership. That's a big part of it. And bad front offices, like they've just done a lot wrong, and I don't think the Jazz are in that spot. While there are some comps, I don't think it's certainly not one-to-one. Derek Nem says, if in your time covering the Jazz, what's the thing that has surprised you the most? Be it a transaction, a game or series result, or player development or lack thereof. There's a lot here. Certainly like most unforeseen, Rudy Gobert turning into a Hall of Famer, I guess would be crazy up there. But I would tell you my favorite thing, and this is still my favorite thing, and we're going through it right now, is guys who surprise me. And look, they don't owe it to me. I'm just operating on my own. It doesn't matter if I, think they're good or bad before or while they're here or after. It doesn't have any meaning at all to the team. But I do love being surprised by the people and the players. The people who as I get to know them a little bit in the locker room and the relationships I establish there a little bit. When I have, I guess, a misconception about a person or a preconceived notion, which is just a bad idea to have in life, and I'm certainly guilty of it. And then I actually get to see them as people and who they are in this regard. And again, who I see in the locker room versus who they are in their private lives is still totally different. So I try not to buy into it too much. But I'm sure everyone felt a certain way about Jordan Clarkson when he got traded, right? He'd been with the Lakers and kind of gotten into the Nick Young circle, and things were a little weird there. And it seemed like, is this guy a serious basketball player or a serious person? And he goes to Cleveland, and I thought, oh, that's a cool fit, and then gets benched in the playoffs and doesn't really play in the finals. And I thought, well, that's a smart move to get off of Dante Exum's contract and Jordan Clarkson expiring. Worst case scenario, he just expires. And then Jordan Clarkson develops into my favorite person I've ever met in the Jazz locker room. I just adored Jordan Clarkson as a person, and I was always very appreciative of the time he carved out for me, and was really kind. And when I would see him at off the court places, if he was doing his Thanksgiving donation thing, and the fact that he really took his Thanksgiving donation seriously and made time for every person that came through. And sometimes people really down on their luck or having a hard time, and Jordan was so human to them. I didn't know if he had that capacity. I had no idea. I see him as an LA guy and whatever. And it's just not who he was at all. It was just totally a misread on my part of who he was before I met him. And then just fell in love with the person that I got to talk to a whole lot. So that was there. Yusuf Nurkic is that guy this season. I'd seen him in Portland, and then the reputation that he wasn't beloved in Phoenix and had nothing in Charlotte, and now comes to Utah and is just so enjoyable. And there's a reason, if you haven't seen him, I get it was the holidays, go back to my Twitter page at Ben's Hoops. Scroll back a little bit. You'll see a chain of videos I posted. I think it was 3 videos of Nurk talking about his relationship with Will Hardy, talking about how much this year I think has meant to him. If I remember which videos I posted, I've got a 7-minute video. I posted 3 different clips, and then one just about how good he thinks Ace Bailey's going to be. It was just he's just a really nice person. This was the guy who I thought was going to come in, cash his checks as a backup center, be a whatever teammate, maybe never totally buy in, and maybe leave the NBA. He's made $120 or $140 million. Maybe just go back home and be the richest person he knows, and just live out life and not really ever care. And the care factor is there. And you don't have to love that he's been a little hard on some Jazz fans who were criticizing the team as is, but he cares about his teammates. That I thought came through. He cares about being a member of the Jazz right now and has some big picture. He even talks about it a little removed. He says the Jazz, I mean we. There is still kind of a little bit of a distance there between this is my team. I don't think he expects to be here forever. This isn't going to be the team that I think he establishes his NBA identity on, and maybe isn't even here by the trade deadline. I don't know. But I thought getting some real introspection, this is a real human being, and all these guys are real people. And as you get to 30, you're totally different than you were when you were 19 and 20. But this is a guy who's examining the landscape. This is a guy who's taking note of the people around him and who's treating him well and why he's being treated well and what that means to him at this point in his life. And those things are fun, as you get older and you start to value different things in your life. And I have certainly, I don't care if the team wins or loses, but I really do enjoy when the players are fun to be around. It makes my life more enjoyable. So Nurk has done that. So I really do appreciate those types of things. And those are what surprises me. And those are the things I enjoy most about the job, if I'm being corny. So I'm sorry, that was a long answer to a question some people may not care that much about because it's not directly about the Jazz. Craig, many people suggest trading players to help with the tank. I would like to see them keep Svi and Nurkic so that they can have building blocks next year. I think they can tank and keep their players by simply playing Taylor and Cody more while resting Key and Lowry. Thoughts? Yeah, you can't have Key, Lowry, Nurk, Kyle Anderson, and probably Kevin Love in this conversation as well. Play every night, play a lot, and still lose games. You've probably got to only have a couple of those guys out there. And I don't want to take umbrage with you saying Taylor and Cody. Yeah, the Jazz are less good when their young players are on the floor, and that probably even includes Walt at this point. I like Walt a lot. Young guys don't know how to win, very rarely do number 1 overall picks come in and help their team win right away. The Cavaliers didn't make the playoffs in LeBron's first year. The Mavericks are barely better than the Jazz with Cooper Flagg, and Cooper Flagg's absolutely exceptional. They didn't win in New Orleans the first year of Zion Williamson. In fact, they've never won. But young guys generally don't win. So yeah, you don't have to unload guys necessarily. I will say this, and again, Nurk is great, and I was just raving about Nurk the person. Ultimately, he's a backup center, I think, right now for the rest of his career in the NBA, and backup centers are a dime a dozen. It's just not that hard to find good backup center play and then, fall in love with them. Svi is another guy I can say you can't play Svi a whole lot and expect to lose games. He's just played so much, he knows how to win. So you got to be a little bit careful with some of those things. But no, you don't necessarily have to blow up the roster via trades. You do have to be a little bit shameless in your tanking. When the Jazz were last year, and they seemed fine with it. But that roster last year for the Jazz was more equipped to just accidentally win games, even though they lost at such a higher rate. But you could only play John Collins 40 games, and Colin Sexton had to play whatever it was 50 games, and Jordan Clarkson had to rarely play, and Lowry had to rarely play, and then you had to put the ball in the hands of a lot of guys who really didn't know how to play at all. I mean, Cody, I don't know if he knew how to play at all last year, and Keontae barely knew how to play, and Flip and Isaiah were trying to figure out how to learn how to play, and they're all better this season. So you got to be a little more selective and maybe not as blatant as they were last year, but I certainly think it's possible without blowing up the roster. Natul says, if the Jazz get lucky and somehow got the number 1 pick as of today, who do you think would be the pick? How would that player help the Jazz immediately? Is that even possible out of a rookie? Again, it's probably not. But where the Jazz maybe might be the weakest right now in their rotation is at the 2. So if you wanted to find fit, Darren Peterson or AJ DeBonsa could probably both slide in and play that 2-3 spot. And then Ace can play opposite either of them, 2 or the 3. I think that would probably be the pathway. I don't think they would go with Boozer. But I could be totally wrong. Again, it's so early. And again, I've watched a few AJ DeBonsa games just because he's local. I've watched a few Cam Boozer games because they're always on TV. And Darren Peterson's been in and out of the lineup, so I have not watched a lot of Darren Peterson yet, other than every time he's on the floor, you look at his box score and the numbers are crazy. It's just it's great every time he steps on the court, and he shoots really well. I mean, that's kind of the nice thing about Darren Peterson, and what might end up separating him is ball in hand more so than Cam Boozer. And Cam's certainly a ball in hand guy, but he's not a guard, so he's not bringing the ball up the court. And that seems like Darren Peterson shoots the heck out of the ball, and so far, AJ DeBonsa, early in his career, so-so. Had a much better December shooting the ball. Here, I'll pull up his stats really quick just so I can actually speak accurately on this. But Darren Peterson this season, again, he's only played 5 games. He's shooting 44% from 3. That's crazy. That's a really awesome number, 44% from 3, and he takes a lot of threes. It's not like in 5 games, he's taken 36 threes. So what is that? Almost 8 a game, and he's shooting 44%. That's crazy. That's a crazy number. AJ's up to 34% from 3, and is taking 1, 2, 3 a game. Not a huge amount, but he's getting better. AJ's a better passer right now, surprisingly, than Darren Peterson. But Darren's also been tasked with needing to score more at Kansas, and I would always just warn you, everyone thought Ace Bailey would never pass the ball. Well, he didn't have anyone to pass to, and now he gets into the NBA and he has guys to pass to, and shock, suddenly he can pass the ball a little bit better. I would imagine Darren Peterson would fall into that same pathway. Well, we'll just do it since you're asking. We'll look just quick raw stats of these guys that we're talking about being in the running for the top 3 picks if the Jazz were to move up, which is a long shot. Darren Peterson right now, 20 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and he's shooting 50% from the floor, 44% from 3. AJ DeBonsa, 23 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. So better numbers, in all honesty. I think just better numbers than Darren Peterson. No argument there. Shooting 58% from the floor. Shocking. I mean, unbelievably efficient. Over a 60% effective field goal percentage. And 34% from 3. And again, I think most people suspect his 3-point shot is going to come around. And then Cam Boozer, 23 points a game, 10 rebounds, 4 assists. So actually has the highest assist total of all of them. Despite the fact that he's a forward and does not initiate the offense. Well, no, he does initiate the offense. Doesn't necessarily bring the ball up the floor as often as AJ DeBonsa or Darren Peterson might. And also shooting exceptionally well, 56% from the floor, below AJ DeBonsa. 34% from 3, right there with AJ. And then 77% from the free throw line, 61% effective field goal percentage. So when you're talking about why everyone's tanking in this draft and wants to get these guys, this is why. 3 guys at the top producing at rarely seen numbers from true freshmen. Witt owns Riley. On Twitter, weird question, but was just curious. I noticed that Zay has gotten away from dunking, as you can tell when he's in the wide open and on fast breaks and opts to do a layup. I know he's unsuccessful on an open dunk earlier this season. Is he just playing it safe by not dunking anymore? Maybe a little bit. I also would warn you that like a lot of guys get tired. It's like dunking takes a lot out of guards. And then guys get really selective with it. Even Karl Malone got pretty selective with his dunking later in his career. Guys love dunking when they get into the NBA, and as they get older, they realize, oh, that's hard. It hurts my hands. It's harder to jump up. It's a little bit more dangerous, I guess. And they get better at finishing around the rim without needing to dunk the ball. Like the ball just goes in, they get better touch. So it may be some of that as well. I should ask him. That's a good question. That's a type of question that players like answering. So that's always fun. You know, like you saw the crazy dunk from Walt Clayton over Derek White. Like he's probably not going to do that a whole lot in his career. Not because he can't. Clearly he can. Just like it takes a lot out of your legs. Donovan Mitchell talked about like doing the dunk contest and dunking a lot early in his career was hard on him. And it does feel like he still dunks pretty often, but some guys really try to stop doing it as much. Ja Morant doesn't dunk as much. It's hard. It's hard to do. Jackson Zumwalt. I love Keontae. That's it. Good question. Or not a question, but I think Jazz fans should feel that same way. Keontae's everything you could have hoped for and more out of a number 15 overall pick, and I think it's just going to get better. Bwendon says, odds the Jazz are trading up in the draft lottery to remain semi-competitive for the rest of the year. Very slim. You're only trading up in the lottery if you own a lottery pick already this season, would be my thought. You'd have to have like the 6th pick and you're trying to get to 4 to get Caleb Wilson or something like that, Jaden Quintons or whoever you think is the number 4 guy in this draft. I don't think you can trade into the top 3. So I don't think, and maybe I read your question wrong, but I don't think you're going to be able to trade up into the lottery all that easily without already having a lottery pick. And again, it's like, is it possible? Yeah, you could probably get into this year's lottery. Like, let's say you convey the 9th pick. You could probably get up to 7 or 8 by trading next year's Lakers pick and the unprotected Suns pick, maybe. Suns are looking better suddenly. And one of your own picks if you wanted to. But like, if you're giving up that much, just lose over the next 40 games. I mean, like, it's 40 games. In the long run, it's not that big of a deal. The sunk costs behind you of all the games you've lost don't matter and shouldn't matter with what you're doing going forward. So just bite the bullet, stink for the next 40, 45 games, and hold on to your pick. Like, you can't let what has happened in the past and the pain that's associated with that change your direction of what you're going to do over the next 50 games. That's bad management. Sam says, how soon till the All-Star teams are announced, and do you think we will see the Jazz sit Lowry and Keontae more once that happens? Keontae got basically nothing on the early returns to the point where the Jazz weren't even really like continuing that campaign on social media all that much. That's completely shifted to Lowry now. Let's look at when our All-Star teams announced in the NBA. Everyone loves Googling. Says this All-Star voting ends on the 14th, so that's 9 days from now. And they will be revealed in late January. But like at that point, while the voting ends, I guess you can still impact the judge or the NBA coaches who make up the reserves. And Lowry wasn't going to get picked as an All-Star starter anyway. So maybe through the majority of January, if that's the goal, is to get Lowry into the All-Star game, so you keep him out there. That's certainly possible. They were announced on January 23rd last year. So later this season, we will see that happen. Or later this month, we should see that happen. Could be 2 weeks, could be 3 weeks. But yeah, I get what you're going for there. I don't really think it matters all that much for Keontae at this point. I don't think that's what the Jazz are trying to sell. Dan, USU the right blue. And this does fit with Whit owns Riley's other question. He says, hope I'm not too late, but how many wins hypothetically would the Jazz need to get a second All-Star this year? By the end of that stretch, by the time these are announced, whatever that is, January 23rd, 24th, 25th, I mean, the Jazz would honestly probably have to win out. I'm not kidding. The Jazz would have to be above 500, and that would mean they would win the rest of their games before those are announced, and the Jazz would have to be like the hot team. And you say, oh, they're the hot team because Keontae George is averaging, this 30-point stretch or 29-point stretch per game that he's on right now over the last 10, and Lowry's continuing to play well, and the Jazz are making a major, major push for the playoffs. So a lot more, and that's obviously not going to happen. But, by mid-January, you probably need to be sitting at 22-ish wins, something like that. Like, That's where Boston is right now. It's where the Lakers are right now. The Rockets could get there. Cavs could get there. I'm talking get there as far as how many All-Stars, not getting to 22 wins. You just need to be right around there. 22, 23 wins at this point next year if you wanted to have 2 All-Stars. And that's not out of the realm of possibilities, I'd say, in the slightest. Positive Jazz guy. I was under the impression that the Jazz Thunder trade, if the Jazz pick didn't convey, it would turn into 2 seconds. Am I completely wrong, or is that just when the deal was first made and then changed? Did Dennis Lindsey think this pick would never convey? That was never the case. This always had an end date on the 2026. There was a previous trade where the Jazz had 2 seconds going out if their pick didn't convey, or maybe it was coming to them. And off the top of my head, I can't remember which one that was. But we do see that a lot. That's not uncommon. So you're not wrong that happens, but that was never the case with this pick. Did Dennis Lindsey just think this pick would never convey? I don't think he cared. I don't think Dennis Lindsey planned on being here that long. So traded out past 2026. It's like, not to get political, but it's like you'll see whoever's the president set rules for, bills to expire and funding for certain programs to expire after they leave office, because then the next guy has to decide how to fund it. Or the next Congress has to decide how to fund it. And we're doing it with healthcare right now in our country. It's like, yeah, you put that problem in the next person's lap. And I'm sure that's what, Dennis Lindsey was thinking when he made that deal. Glad to pay you tomorrow for a hamburger today. That's exactly what happened with Dennis Lindsey in that pick. And he probably didn't care if it conveyed. Whatever. It's not his problem. And if it doesn't, good for the Jazz. But they have had to live under that sword for a while now. That's been an axe hanging over their head for some time. Brandon Britton says, how does this group do in the West next year? Excuse me. What seed are they assuming Ace becomes just a solid starter and the 7th pick is a project? He says, here's your starters. Keontae George, Austin Reeves, so it would be a huge offseason addition for the Jazz. Ace Bailey, Lauri Markkanen, and Walker Kessler, your starting 5. And then your bench is the number 7 pick. So 7 picks of this year's draft, probably not going to produce a whole lot. Bryce, Taylor, Cody, Clayton, Isaiah. With all due respect to Bryce Sensabaugh, Taylor Hendricks, Cody Williams, Clayton, Walt Clayton, and Isaiah Collier, that would be the worst bench in the NBA by a lot. So that would be a disaster. That team would not make the playoffs. I pretty firmly believe that. Depth is what really wins right now in the NBA. Now, maybe Bryce or Taylor or Cody or Isaiah or Flip, you put Flip in this group, takes a major step forward, or Walt Clayton takes a step forward, and all of a sudden, they have a good second or third year, the same way Keontae George is having a great third year, and they're more competitive, and you'd have to get a backup center. I know you're just not discussing that. It's not like they wouldn't have one. But I don't think that's an all-star or a playoff team in the West. And man, you want bad defense, put Austin Reeves on this roster. That would be a disastrous defensive team. Austin's a really good player. He's very much what Keontae's doing. Keontae's actually probably just playing a little bit better than Austin Reeves is. And they're both equally unimpactful defensive players right now. In fact, I think he probably has a much better chance to be a good defensive player. So I would look at someone who fills more of a role, though Austin's a very good player. He might be a little bit redundant with what Keontae George does. I might look for a true stalwart defensively on the defensive side of the ball at that position. And then you might be cooking with something. I'm really curious about Walker going forward. I have no idea. His start to the year was so promising. If he comes back and is really good next year, and that shoulder is 100%, which talking to him, he said it just was never 100%. He was limited in some of his actions, so maybe he could be better on the floor. But the Jazz have to fill out this roster defensively. I would look at a major piece at the 2 defensively. I would hope Ace takes a major step forward defensively, and then the second unit, I would really prioritize kind of veterans who know how to play defense, and then whichever of these young players can kind of still fit into this role and continue to survive there and make an impact on that side of the ball. Codon says, Ben, do you think the Jazz will extend Keontae George this summer? What is the projected contract he could get? Certainly looking at 9 figures now, which is crazy. I mean, honestly, I think there was a case before the season that, is he in the NBA next season? I think he was always going to get a second chance somewhere because of the flashes. And this is the silly thing that does happen in the NBA. He's had enough flashes against enough teams that they might be short-sighted to say, well, he played well against us. Let's give him a contract. Now, if he were to sign a contract this summer, it's $100 million easily. I mean, Keontae's playing at such a high level. Somebody would gladly give that to him. For that reason, though, and the same with Walker, I don't know if he gets paid. I think the Jazz showed a willingness to be patient and wait to pay guys until they have to and not lock themselves into difficult, financially unflexible situations. And there's no reason to pay Keontae before you have to. you don't have to pay him this summer. Wait until he becomes a restricted free agent and give him as much as you want. Now, if you are more worried that he could get a huge offer in restricted free agency, like a true max offer, and you can save money on it, and you feel like by the end of the year, you know that's coming, and you know he's going to keep up this level of play or better next year, and it's going to cost you more money, lock him up. But you are probably looking, if you're signing him early, Keontae's got to get paid because he also has somebody in his ear saying, you're going to get the max in the summer of 2027. So wait on it. And you're probably going to be coming off, maybe an all-star year. I don't want to say probably, that's a reach, but you might be coming off an all-star year. You should wait to sign your contract. To convince him to sign early, you'd have to really throw some huge money at him. So you could be looking at 140. I don't know what all he's eligible for, but it could be that high of a number. No question about it. Whit owns Riley with another question. Says, how did the Jazz get Will Hardy to buy into benching his guys unnecessarily in order to tank? I'm sure Will understands the bigger picture, but it's also his reputation on the line. Just wondering how Will might feel about intentionally losing games. Well, they keep giving him contract extensions, and that probably makes it easier. And I'm sure he sees, some of the roster building aspects of the team and recognizes adding another top 5 or 6 pick to this roster. And look, here's the other thing about the pick, and we've touched on it slightly, is there's a chance if it's 6, 7, 8, the Jazz don't make the pick and they trade it. There's a very real chance of that. And it's not what I've heard, but you just look at the youth on this roster. Key's really good. Ace is going to be pretty good, I think. I think he might be really good. Walt's going to be pretty good. Flip's playing well. Taylor still shows flashes. You have no idea with Cody and Bryce, and those guys have both shown some flashes. Bryce more obviously than Cody so far to this point, but he's played a lot more. Isaiah's played well. There's good young talent on this team. Do the Jazz actually need to add another 6, 7, 8 pick? If you really love somebody, do it. But man, if you're 50-50 on how good this player is going to be, this might be a good year to trade that pick. Trade it and take on a really good player back. You're getting a nice player for the 6th, 7th, or 8th pick in a trade. And as you've seen, there's just no guarantee those guys turn into good players or are close to being good players. And if Ryan Smith and Austin Ainge and Danny Ainge and Will Hardy decide, Justin Zanuck certainly in that conversation decide we want to be in the playoffs next year, trade that 7th pick, man. Trade that 8th pick. That's no guarantee that you're going to get a really good player out of it. Go and get a guy that can come back and step in and be your starting 2 guard for the foreseeable future. Go get a 26-year-old that you really believe in for a team that's dialing it back, that's hitting the reset button and wants another high lottery pick. I think that's certainly in the realm of possibilities for the Jazz. So that's kind of the approach I would take, and Will Hardy would understand that to answer the question. Riggy, howdy and happy New Year. What are some New Year's dissolutions you would give the Jazz? Not resolutions. Sometimes shedding bad habits can be just as important for growth as developing new good ones. Bryce should dribble less, kind of always jumps out to me. Cody should probably shoot a little bit less or shoot more, but shoot more at the rim. I think those are things for Cody Williams to continue to try to do. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I should have read that question before I read it, just to see if I could come up with some other ideas for you. But no, I think the Jazz are actually doing a lot of things well. I think the guys have fit into good spots. The best example of this is Svi. Last year, I thought Svi was a borderline disaster. Every time he touched the ball, he shot it. Didn't seem like he looked through his teammates at all. It was just chaotic. And no, he's awesome this year. I think he's been really good. So Svi's a guy who's doing less and playing more, I guess, or performing better, to your point. Dan Benner says, what is Keontae's contract looking like? Sorry, I know we've addressed that one already. Probably, well over at least 120, which is great for him. That's a ton of money. Jesse, with the deadline fast approaching, do you get the sense the Jazz would be interested in anything more substantial than the red paperclip trades they've made over the last few years? And again, the red paperclip trade is the turn, a late second-round pick into a slightly better second-round pick, and then maybe turn that second-round pick into a a really late first-round pick. And, can you make these little tiny trades that get a little bit better? You win every trade by 5%, 5%, 5%, and eventually end up with a pretty good piece. Probably not this year, in all honesty. Again, we've talked about some names like a Benedict Mathurin. Would someone like that come in and help the Jazz and make that move? It's certainly possible. I wouldn't rule it out, but I do think the Jazz are starting to point in the direction that they're not trying to necessarily get better this year. So I think you're probably looking at maybe, some draft pick type of trades, like something with the Lakers pick next year. I could see that. Then again, I think that Lakers pick is really interesting. You just can't tell what's going on with LeBron. The Lakers have a decent record this year, but it's not like so impressive that there's a chance they wouldn't miss the playoffs next season. Like, you just look around. The Thunder were really good at being patient. Even when some of their picks didn't look like they were conveyed, they didn't panic. They just held on to picks, and all of a sudden they're getting good Clippers picks now, and they've gotten good picks in the past from all these teams around them. They didn't get I think they were owed the 76ers pick last year, and they didn't get it, and it's like they didn't panic. You just got to wait on some of these teams to hopefully be bad, and you just never know with the Lakers. So right now, looking at differential, kind of your net rating, your score differential, though. The Lakers right now are actually, they are plus 0.1. So they are the worst team with a positive point differential in the NBA. And I'm looking at ESPN, and this isn't the NBA numbers. And I could look up the NBA numbers, but we'll just go off ESPN. So they are just barely above the Hawks, the Grizzlies, the Clippers, and not barely. They're 2 points better than those teams, but they are behind Philly, Golden State, Orlando, Toronto, Phoenix, Cleveland, Miami, Minnesota, San Antonio, and then all the good teams in the NBA. But like their actual points per game minus opponents' points per game, which again is really flawed. Here, I'll just pull up their actual net rating. I can clear this really quickly for you to talk and kind of break down where we think this team is for the season. The Lakers are 16th in net rating. 16th. I mean, that's a lottery team. The 16th worst team in the NBA gets a lottery pick. No, I guess they're the last seed in the playoffs. So this is a team that's the last seed in the playoffs right now based on their net rating alone, not Western Conference, Eastern Conference. If you bet that they're going to get worse next year, and the way they get worse next year is LeBron retires or LeBron joins another team, because LeBron's still a very good offensive player. And let's say they lose Austin Reeves, who goes and signs a max contract somewhere else. I don't think Austin Reeves is leaving the Lakers, to be honest with you, but even then, that's not a guarantee that they're going to be awesome. And then like Luka plays 50 games. Luka's teams don't actually usually have high regular season win totals. They're good playoff teams because he's so awesome in a 7-game series. He's the best player on the floor very often, so they can win those. But his teams don't generally do great. Like, I'd probably hold on to that Lakers pick. It's not going to be top 4 unless they win the lottery and then you lose the pick, which would be unfortunate. That pick does turn into second-round draft picks, to go back to an earlier mailbag question. But I would hold on to that pick because there's a chance it is 13, 12. They just kind of have a little bit of a disastrous year with injuries. LeBron leaves. Maybe he doesn't, but maybe he does. Or he's just a year older. Maybe he's the injury. I mean, Father Time's undefeated for a reason. And they miss the playoffs, and they give the Jazz a lottery pick. Like, that's not crazy. That's not crazy at all. So while I think that pick probably could be available for the right deal, I don't know if you trade that in season. Anyways, I think that's the last of my questions. Let me go back to Blue Sky and see if anybody else responded. Yes, Blue Sky Stars says, Bruno says, how is the front office navigating the balance of having a winning record that's a little too good right now for where they may be expected to be with securing their 2026 draft pick from versus giving it to OKC? Do they have a set contingency plan for if they win too much or if they pivot hard towards losing? I would remind you that, like, look at the Jazz's win totals after the All-Star break each of the last 3 seasons. Like, Will Hardy's first 2 years in Utah, I think the Jazz were 1 game under 500 total at the trade deadline. His first 2 seasons, 1 game under 500 total, and then disastrous after the trade deadline. Last year, they were basically pretty bad throughout, but were really, really bad down the stretch. So the Jazz just may be willing to, over the last 25 games of the season, just completely go in the tank and win 2 games. They might go 1-12 in back-to-back stretches to close the year and just finish with a 2-24 record. That could happen, and that would have to start soon because there's just not that many games left in the season, but that's, probably starting in mid-February, which again is when the trade deadline is, the All-Star break is. So you could certainly see that happen. So the contingency plan is the same one we've seen over and over. I think it's possible. Again, it's not necessarily fun to talk about if you're a Jazz fan, but I certainly think it's possible. All right, let me go one over this. Oh, okay, Jazz Time Jones asked one more question. What's the plan with Kyle Anderson? Seems very capable, yet he's sitting on our bench wasting his career. I feel bad for him. I guess I feel a little bit bad for Kyle, too. The fact that he's not out there playing, and as he showed against the Clippers, he can really play. the question is like, what role is he in on a good team going forward? I bet someone could buy on him. Someone could buy on George Niang. I know we haven't seen him at all. I don't know if someone can buy on Yusuf Nurkic just because it's really hard to spend $19 million. And I think someone could buy on Kevin Love because he's pretty cheap. So all of those, I think, are on the table for trades. And I think the Jazz would try and do right by those guys to put them in spots to win. And I think part of kind of this deal of, hey, Kyle, you're not going to play. I'm sorry you're not going to play. You're certainly capable of performing. You can see that when you are on the court. But we will do right by you by the trade deadline. I suspect those types of conversations are had, but I've not been told that. All right, I think that's it. A lot of mailbag questions. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. I'm sorry if I missed any at the last minute, but appreciate getting, 23, 24, 25 questions there with all the DMs as well. That's crazy. We will be back with you again on Thursday with a recap of what's happened in these last couple of games and get you ready for the weekend. Stick around. More Jazz Notes coming up later this week.